Hello, I'm joined now by Mike Hawes, who's the Chief Executive of the SMMT. He's the organisation that represents the automotive industry in the UK. Mike, thank you so much for joining us today.
A pleasure.
It's very good to see you. We're going to talk a bit about, obviously, the automotive industry in 2020, probably a year you want to forget. But also, I'll be asking you about what you're expecting, in the next couple of years and where all of this is going. No doubt you understand that for the radio industry, the car is a very important place. And the fact that several million of them are sold every year, bringing radios, and in most cases digital radios, has been great news for the radio industry. This has obviously been an incredibly challenging year for all of us and for all businesses, and I would say probably particularly for the automotive industry. How would you summarize the impact of the pandemic for your industry?
Pretty brutal. We were probably more badly affected than many sectors, but not as badly as others. Obviously, hospitality is one that obviously springs to mind. I think are the most affected. But even across manufacturing, some parts of manufacturing, think food and drink, pharmaceuticals, most obviously, working all hours, God send. We had to shut down in terms of manufacturing. So we had a couple of months where we were producing. Production was down like 95%. It was just a handful of cars we were making. Then you look at the retail side, equally shut. There was no ability to buy a car and no appetite to buy a car either, or anything else. It's begun to pick up, but overall, I think we'll probably see production down and sales down, probably something around 30% this year. Ironically, the only bright spot you'll see, towards at the back end of this year is sales of, vans have obviously, accelerated because that's how we're getting our food and increasingly our goods from the high street.
Indeed, and you mentioned the retail side and what we know as the dealer showrooms and car dealers. And am I right in saying they closed in both lockdowns?
Yeah, they were. We were obviously closed when we went to lockdown in March. Reopened June. We were able to reopen ahead of most of the rest of non-essential retail. But again, in England, they reopened. They were shut for the lockdown. Only just reopened. It obviously varies from Wales to Northern Ireland to Scotland and so forth. And some of the lessons that we learned in the first lockdown were applied to this one. So much more click and collect type operations, which have taken place. And because you knew it was for a finite time, when you went in March, we didn't know how long this was going to last. And to a certain extent, I think the general public said, okay, we'll get through this 4 weeks, then we'll see where we are.
Yeah.
Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but it's COVID secure environment. It's not like going into a high street shop. There's a lot of space. There's an outdoor as well as an indoor. So, of retail environments, it's a safer place, more obviously than many others.
No, I'm right in saying, I think last year in 2019, you sold about 2.3 million cars in the year. Off your peak of about 2.6 a few years ago. So you said you thought sales for this year would be about 30% down?
About 1.6 million, something around there. The last lockdown hasn't helped. We'll see how much that gives a boost to December. Ironically, December's not normally a very strong month for new car sales. Brits don't tend to give one another cars as Christmas presents. The Americans do. December is one of the busiest months. I think we're a bit more constrained in our spending.
Yeah. And then I think your organization has looked forward, hasn't they, over to 2021 and 22. What do you expect the demand and sales to be going forward?
Difficult to forecast. Production, obviously 80% of what we produce is exported, so we're at the whim of what the level of demand is, not just in the UK but major international markets, obviously the rest of Europe, first and foremost. Vaccine gives a lot of people encouragement. Obviously it's going to do, hopefully it'll do what we need it to do, and that's save lives. But also just its availability and the more you can get society back to normal. Hopefully that'll give more consumers and businesses more confidence, because obviously the dramatic fall in GDP in the UK and elsewhere. Yes, we will be growing next year, but we won't be back to where we were. So purchasing a car it's normally a discretionary purchase. So if you are feeling like belt needs to be tightened, you'll delay it and you'll put it off, and that's not what we need as an industry. Given the particular challenges we've got about meeting environmental goals as well. Delaying purchasing doesn't help that either. So I think for next year, I think, as you get towards the second half of the year, I think we'll have more confidence about where economies are and where society is as a result. And that will probably flow through to our industry.
I'm going to shift gear now, Mike, and focus really in on radio, because this is a video being watched by the many people in the radio industry. And do you think your industry and your members still, recognize the importance of radio and how many passengers and obviously drivers listen to the radio in their cars?
Absolutely. I think, you alluded to it earlier. The changing nature of infotainment within a car is significant, and that is moving on apace. The level of technology we've got about, it's not going to be, we're not going to get to self-driving cars in a single bound, but incremental improvements to road safety potentially gives people more time in the vehicle without actually having to be solely focused on the driving task. That opens up some opportunities. Invariably, when people are in the car, they want that form of entertainment or information around them. Often that's radio. Competition is undoubtedly getting greater in terms of other forms of providing that information, providing the content. And that's where the challenges to the radio to make sure that they still can be relevant. And certainly, what you do get with radio is that up to the minute broadcast to all approach, which, it can be a very shared experience.
So your members still, I think, recognize the importance of radio and obviously fitting radios in all cars.
Yeah, we have. And, as you know, the level of fitment for digital radio in particular is something like 94, 95% now. And, that's been increasing over the past 10 years or so. And invariably when people are purchasing a vehicle, why are they attracted? What do they particularly like about a particular vehicle? And invariably the environment that they're in often features highly in having that increasing connectivity in a vehicle, but also, the internal environment, and that's certainly part of it.
Well, and at this point, I probably should recognise that in the last 10 years, as you say, digital fitment in cars has gone from 4% to 94%, which is a phenomenal achievement. And I wanted to actually thank you, the SMMT, and all your members for making that happen, because it has made a huge difference. And hopefully it's made a difference for people who are in their car journeys as well.
Absolutely. And I think, what people appreciate is the clarity that you get from digital radio. It's the lack of reception. The choice obviously is much greater than it would be otherwise. And as long as people can, we're also today access it. And one of the challenges always in terms of faced in the UK is about being able to access digital broadcast, being able to access 2, 3G, 4G, or whatever for other reasons, for in terms of driving. We want the UK to be at the forefront of the technological shift. We're an advanced country. We should be leading it. We need sometimes the infrastructure, certainly when we are thinking of what's going to happen to the evolution of the vehicle and more, connectivity, the provision of information, making sure we've got 4G and 5G can help you leap towards some of the safer technologies more quickly. So, we're focused on that, as well as obviously in terms of, broadcast reception.
Well, I wanted to just close again by restating, the radio industry's thanks to you and your colleagues and your members. There are now many hundreds of digital stations on air, and, increasingly amount of time is spent listening to those stations in car, and it couldn't have happened without that transition you referred to, the journey from 4% to 94%. So our thanks to you, Mike, and thank you so much for spending time.
Good to see you again. Thanks very much indeed.
Nice to see you, Mike. Take care. Bye-bye. Having talked to Mike Hawes and the SMMT about radio in cars in the UK, I wanted to look more broadly at the picture across Europe, but also look to the future. And, I'm now joined by two experts on that field. And I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Rosie Smith, who's the project manager of automotive for WorldDAB. Welcome, hello. Rosie.
Hello.
Good to see you. And I'm also joined by my old friend and colleague, Laurence Harrison, who's the Director of Automotive Partnerships at Radioplayer. Laurence, welcome.
Hi there, thanks for having me.
Rosie, turning to you, I think just recently there's been an EU directive, I think in 2020, that asked to mandate digital radio receivers in new cars across Europe. We've seen that adopted in the UK. But can you tell us about what's happening in Europe, and is it going to make a big difference to the fitment of digital radio in cars?
Yeah, so similarly to the UK, I think this has given clarity to the market in Europe and to the vehicle manufacturers. They've had a clear date to work towards, and that date is coming up very quickly, the 21st of December 2020.
Yeah.
All new cars in Europe will have digital radio as standard. And across all markets, regardless of where they are in DAB development, they all have to now have new cars with digital radio. So this is going to be a huge sea change. And we're very pleased about this because it does give everybody security, knowing that they will have services on air in the car now and in the future. We're not seeing any country that is dragging its heels, and we're also seeing that all the vehicle manufacturers are ready. So that's great news for Europe and for the UK as well. If we ever get to travel again, you will be able to drive from one place to the another and still have digital services.
Now, Laurence, when we talked to Mike Hawes, as well as the digital radio fitment in cars, he talked about the increasing connectivity in cars, which I guess is a major theme now. And I wondered how you feel now, particularly in your new role, about radio's place in the car, and whether we're going to get squeezed by the likes of Google and Amazon and Apple, or how will radio keep its prominence and keep relevant in the car?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and that's the sort of thing that occupies a lot of my time and our time in Radioplayer. I mean, the first thing to say is that, of course, Mike's right. The vast majority of cars now are coming with built-in connectivity, and I think it's really important to point out that we don't see any evidence that will come at the expense of broadcast radio. So we still see, partly because of the regulations that Rosie just talked about, but also because, there's huge listening on broadcast DAB digital radio in the car, and it's free to air. And if you're streaming, audio or radio over the internet, there's a cost to that. And in these difficult times, that's important. So yes, connectivity is coming, but not at the expense of broadcast radio. To your broader question about, I guess, radio strength in the dashboard, we absolutely, even though broadcast will remain, we cannot be complacent. And you're absolutely right. The growth of connectivity in the car does mean an increase in competition, as well as new technologies like Android Automotive, because what that's going to mean, that's Google's new operating system. And what that will mean is that the dashboard effectively becomes an app store. No longer will you have to connect your phone to get access to an app store. You'll be able to download apps direct from your dashboard. And that plus connectivity means more competition. So radio, we need to be on our toes to keep radio strong in the car. And I think there are two main things that the industry needs to do. The first one is to collaborate, because those competitors in the car tend to be large tech companies with very deep pockets, and they're investing huge amounts of money in the experience of their services in the car. So radio can't really compete on a national basis. We have to come together, at least across Europe, if not globally, and work together to keep radio strong. And the second thing is to really invest in the user experience. And we believe, and I think the vast majority of the industry believes, that that's around hybrid radio. So that's DAB and FM working together with the internet. So you get the best of robust broadcast free-to-air backbone working with the internet connection for a return path, and also data that can provide a really rich app-like experience. So we're really focusing on hybrid radio being the standard experience in all cars of the future. And that has to be supported by great metadata. And that's something that I've been working with Rosie on over the last few months.
Brilliant. And I'm glad you mentioned metadata, because that is something I wanted you to explain to us a little bit more about what that is, because there'll be some non-broadcasters on this call. So Rosie, can you talk to us a little bit about what metadata is, and can you tell us what the WorldDAB Automotive Group is doing to support that?
Yeah, well, following on from what Laurence has just said, we want to make the experience for drivers in the car of radio, both audio and visuals, the best it can possibly be. So WorldDAB's been working on a campaign to explain exactly, as you say, what is metadata and how do broadcasters use the metadata that they have, even if they don't know they have it, and transfer that into a really rich experience in the car. And we've created a short animation to explain it, and we've got information sheets and FAQs and all sorts of technical information as well. But on a very basic level, we want to make sure that broadcasters at the very least have their logo on the screen in the car in the right size, in the right resolution, and their brand is there every time someone turns the radio on. At a more advanced level, we want broadcasters to present their stations in a way that is richer. So artist name, title of the song, things like that, what's coming next. So having that experience in the car of radio that is both audio and visual, but also making sure it's safe for the driver. So we don't want to take away what is a very safe experience for radio at this time by putting too many things on the screen. So WorldDAB and the automotive group of WorldDAB are working on some guidelines for slideshow to make sure that slides are clear and show your brand, but without taking the driver away from his main function, driving the car.
Brilliant. Well, look, I mean, my thanks to both of you for taking the time to join us. I mean, my conclusion certainly is that, you know, the radio industry is very focused on the car and the experience in car, and obviously looking to the future. I mean, it looks like it's going to be challenging, but at least I think you have a very good grasp of the issues and you're making the right investments and innovations. So thank you for joining us, and wish you well. And is it too early to say Happy Christmas?
No, never
no, I
too
think you
early.
can get away with that. And thanks for having me, and I hope the event goes well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.